Now, those last set of problems were all part plus part. They added up to 90 or 180, which are big numbers in geometry. These ones right here are going to be a little bit different. Now, remember, if we talked about it earlier, if you saw ticks, that meant that something in segments, and the same thing is what arcs mean in angles. Hopefully you remembered congruent. So remember that these arcs just mean that they're congruent. So if they're congruent, all I need to do to set this up is set them equal to each other. So I could say 2x equals 80, or I could say 80 equals 2x. Either way, whenever you divide by 2, you get that x is 40. So thinking back, we could add up to 90, we could add up to 180, or now we could set problems up with part equals part again. Now, on this next one, I see an x, I see angles across from each other. If you remember, if you scroll back, angles that are across from each other in the x were vertical angles, and vertical angles are always congruent. So because they're vertical angles, they're congruent, I can set up this one as p equals p as well. And what's nice about part equals part problems is that it really doesn't matter which side which part is on. I like to pick the bigger coefficient and do that one first, but it really doesn't matter. So this one would set up, it would be 9y plus 7 part equals the other part, 2y plus 98. Now, if you go to solve this, we're going to have variables on both sides. We want them just on one. So I'm going to try to put the letter on the left by moving that over. So I would subtract 2y from both sides. 9y minus 2y would make that 7y plus 7 equals 98. Subtract 7 from both sides. And remember, we're not going to spend a ton of time on the solving, but 7y should equal 91, my bad. And then 91 divided by 7 is 13. Now, for this next one, they gave you three different variables and only one number, 65. So ask yourself, is there any that's congruent to 65? Is there anything that we know right off the bat? Well, remember, if they're vertical angles, they're congruent. So if one's 65, then the one across from it should also be 65. So now I know that y is 65. And then the question becomes, how do I find x and z? And it goes back to this. That's a line, right? And a line should add up to 180, which means that this one plus this one should add up to 180. It works this way as well. That's a line, which means that one and that one should add up to 180. So what's 180 minus 65? 115. So x would be 115. And then what would z be? Well, those are across from each other, so z should also be 115. Now, the way to remember it is that vertical angles, so across from each other, should be the same. To find the other one, just subtract from 180. So now we have a picture. It says, if the lines are intersecting, if NP and Q are intersecting lines, find the measure of angle RWP. So RWP would be that piece right there. Now, remember, whenever we have multiple step problems, our first step is usually going to be to solve for x. So if I notice what type of angles are those, think they're across from each other, how would we set this up? Well, they're vertical angles. Which means they're congruent, which means part equals part. So I'm going to say 6x minus 28 equals 4x plus 20. And then I'm going to solve for x. So I'm going to put the letter on the left by subtracting 4x. So I have 2x minus 28 equals 20. Add 28 to both sides. So 2x equals 48, which makes x 24. Now, x wasn't the answer. I need to take that and plug it back in over here. So I'm going to find out what's 6 times 24 minus 28. I need to figure out what's 4 times 24 plus 20, and they should be the same thing. I'm going to give you a minute to do that right now. And you should get 116 for both. But remember, the question wasn't asking us for that angle. The question was asking us for this angle. So think, how do we find the other one in vertical angles? Hopefully you remembered, subtract from 180. So what's 180 minus 116? 64 degrees. And that's how we get our answer. So let's take a look at one more. And I see this word bisect in here. Remember that bisect means to cut in half. So it says, find the value of x given that FG bisects angle AFB. So think, if it bisects, that means it's going to cut it in half. I'm going to go ahead and put some arcs on my picture. It means that whatever this one is, this one should be the exact same thing. So it says angle AFB. So this whole angle is 17x plus 8. And then the measure of angle GFB, so GFB, just half of it, is 9x plus 2. Now remember that those arcs, if this is 9x plus 2, what does this part have to be? 9x plus 2. And if they give you the whole, then we're going to have to add them up to equal that. So 9x plus 2 and 9x plus 2 should equal 17x plus 8. So think about it. What's 9x plus 2 and 9x plus 2 make? 18x plus 4 should equal the whole 17x plus 8. And if you solve for x, you should get that x equals 4. Hopefully you learned some stuff about angles today, keeping in mind that problems were separated into part equals part or part plus part equals whole. Go back and look at your notes if you can't remember what they look like, and then from there decide. So if you see supplementary, part plus part. If you see vertical, part equals part. Good luck on your practice.